Marcus Chen had spent 3 months designing his backyard paradise. Not the Instagram kind, the real kind. The kind that represented 15 years of building his career as a structural engineer, 12 years of marriage to a woman he loved, and 7 years of watching his own kids grow up with every advantage he never had. The pool wasn't just water and concrete. It was proof that he'd made it. That the kid from the apartment complex in Oakland, whose only splash pad was a fire hydrant in summer, could create this. A resort-level saltwater infinity pool with underwater LED lighting, a sun shelf for toddlers, a deep end for proper swimming. The stone deck was heated. The landscaping was professional. Every detail was intentional. On a Saturday afternoon in late June, Marcus was inside his house, working on blueprints for a commercial development in San Jose. His wife, Jennifer, was at her yoga class. Their 2 kids, Emma, 8, and Lucas, 5, were both at friends' houses for playdates. The house was silent except for the hum of the central air and the distant sound of the neighborhood kids playing somewhere beyond the property line. Marcus had just pulled up a coffee when his phone buzzed. A notification from his Ring doorbell camera. He frowned. They weren't expecting anyone. He tapped the notification and watched as a woman appeared on his porch, her hand raised to knock. She was maybe 40, with the kind of tight smile that told him she was gearing up for something difficult. He didn't recognize her. Marcus muted his laptop and headed downstairs, already composing the polite excuse in his head. He opened the door before she could knock. "Hi," she said, that same tight smile in place. "I'm Corinne Morrison. I live 3 streets over on Redwood." Marcus knew the street. Knew it well, actually. He'd driven through there this morning on his way to the bagel shop. It was the older part of their neighborhood where the houses were smaller, the lots less manicured, the demographic considerably less affluent than his street. "Marcus Chen," he said, keeping his tone neutral. "What can I do for you?" Corinne's smile faltered slightly. This is a little awkward, but I'm here about your pool." "My pool?" "Yes, well, not your pool exactly. I mean, it is your pool, but—" She shifted her weight. "My kids have been swimming in it." The words took a moment to process. Marcus's first instinct was to think she was joking, some kind of neighbor outreach or prank, but her expression was too earnest, too anxious. She genuinely expected him to know this. "I'm sorry," Marcus said slowly. "What?" "My 3 kids, they're 8, 9, and 11. They found a gap in your back fence. There's a loose board where the property line meets the woods. They've been going through there to swim in your pool, on afternoons when they think no one's home." Marcus felt heat rising in his chest. "How long?" "Since you had the pool finished, about 2 months. 2 months, 8 weeks of unauthorized children in his pool. 8 weeks of liability, of safety hazards he didn't know about, of his privacy violated on a daily basis." "You're just telling me about this now?" His voice came out sharper than he intended. Corinne flinched. "I only found out last week. My oldest came home with a towel that wasn't hers and I pressed her on it. She confessed everything. I was mortified, honestly. I told her it was absolutely not okay, that she had to stop immediately. I came over here several times to tell you, but you're never home during the day, and I got nervous about it. I didn't know how you'd react." "How I'd react?" Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Your children have been trespassing on my property for 8 weeks, and you're concerned about my reaction." "I know it sounds bad when you say it like that." "It's not about how I say it, it's the fact. Your children are trespassing, that's a fact. They've been coming onto my property without permission. That's a crime. A minor one, sure, but a crime." Corinne's face went red. "They're just kids trying to cool off in the summer. They didn't mean any harm." "That's not relevant," Marcus said. "Intent doesn't matter. Your children entered my property without permission. Do you understand what could have happened? If one of them had been injured in that pool, who would be liable?" "I know, and I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix it. Sorry means you knew about it and didn't immediately come tell me. You let it continue for a week after you found out." Corinne's eyes were starting to glisten. "I'm trying to handle this the right way. I'm trying to talk to you like adults instead of calling the police or something." "And I appreciate that," Marcus said, and he almost meant it. "But the damage is already done. You need to make sure your kids understand that this is serious, that trespassing isn't a game, that other people's property isn't a public resource just because you want to use it." "They're just children," Corinne said quietly. "I know they are, which is exactly why their parents need to teach them boundaries." There was a long silence. Corinne looked down at her hands. When she looked back up, her expression had hardened slightly. "You're right," she said. "I'm sorry we bothered you. I'll make sure it stops. Have a good day, Mr. Chen." She turned and walked to her car. Marcus watched her go, still feeling the adrenaline coursing through his system. He closed the door and leaned against it for a moment, trying to regulate his breathing. He'd handled that fine, maybe a little harsh, but justified, completely justified. But as he stood there in his hallway, something uncomfortable twisted in his stomach. An image came unbidden, his own kids, asking him why they couldn't go splash in the pool at the edge of the woods when no one seemed to use it. Children didn't see private property the way adults did. They saw water, they saw freedom, they saw summer. Marcus pushed the thought away and headed back upstairs to his blueprints. Marcus had found a contractor who came out Sunday evening and reinforced the entire back section of the fence with new boards and a metal backing. He even had them add a secondary lock to the gate, one that required a key card. The whole thing cost $800, but Marcus didn't care. He wanted the problem solved. He wanted it solved visibly. When he got home that evening and saw the new fencing, he felt something settle in him. Good, problem handled. He wouldn't think about Corinne Morrison or her kids again. Except he did. Over the next week, he found himself replaying the conversation, imagining how it had gone differently in his head, what he should have said, what she should have said, the angle of her shoulders when she turned to leave, that small, defeated posture that maybe, possibly, had been something other than just disappointment. Jennifer noticed something was bothering him. She asked about it on Thursday night, after the kids were asleep. They were sitting on the deck overlooking the pool, drinks in hand, and she gently pressed him until he told her the whole story. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "Do you think she was trying to make it right?" Jennifer finally asked. "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "I think she was trying to avoid confrontation." Which is still trying to make it right, though, in her own way. Marcus didn't respond. He took a sip of his drink. "Emma asked me today why the fence looked different," Jennifer said. "I told her you fixed a gap. She seemed disappointed. She wanted to show me where it was." "She's never been back there." "I know, she was just curious. Kids are curious about things like that, little gaps and hidden places. It's how they explore." Marcus felt that uncomfortable twist again. "Are you saying I overreacted?" "I'm saying that maybe the woman was genuinely sorry and genuinely trying to handle it properly. And instead of accepting her apology and maybe talking about solutions, you made her feel like a criminal." "Her kids are criminals. They trespassed." "They're 9-year-olds who wanted to swim," Jennifer said quietly, "in a neighborhood where most people don't have pools." That detail struck something in Marcus. He'd lived his whole life in a neighborhood where most people didn't have pools. He'd spent every summer sticky and hot and desperate for water. He knew exactly what those kids felt. "I'm not apologizing," he said. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't quite true, or rather, he wouldn't apologize, but he should have, maybe. "I'm not asking you to," Jennifer said. "I'm just saying maybe think about it." The conversation stuck with him, rubbing under his skin like a pebble in a shoe. By the following Monday, Marcus decided to do something about it. He composed an email to an address he found in the neighborhood Facebook group, where he identified Corinne Morrison as someone who participated in local fundraising efforts. The email was carefully worded, friendly but professional. He offered a compromise. If Corinne wanted, her kids could use the pool on Saturday afternoons from 2 to 4, supervised, as long as they followed the safety rules he would provide. It was a reasonable gesture. It was the kind of thing a good neighbor would do. Corinne never responded. Marcus checked his email compulsively for 3 days before deciding she'd rejected his offer. Fine, he'd tried. That was enough. Except it wasn't enough. By the second week of July, Marcus found himself doing something he'd never done before. He began monitoring his security cameras more closely than usual. He watched the footage obsessively, checking every few hours for any sign of breach, any sign of the Morrison kids or any other neighborhood kids. He wasn't sure why. The fence was secure. The problem was solved. And yet he watched. On July 18th at 3:47 p.m., while Marcus was at work, his Ring doorbell recorded something new. A man, maybe 45, walking slowly past his house. The man paused at the driveway, looking at the house for a full 30 seconds. Then he continued walking. Nothing suspicious, really. just a neighbor he didn't recognize taking a walk. But the next day, the same man appeared at 3:52 p.m., then on the 20th at 3:45 p.m. Marcus ran the footage back and forth, studying the man's face. He wasn't doing anything wrong, just walking, just looking. But there was something about it that made Marcus's skin prickle with awareness. On July 21st, Marcus left work early. He parked his car 2 blocks away and walked back to his house, then let himself in through the garage. He positioned himself in the second-floor guest room, which had a view of the back fence and gate, and he waited. At 3:30 p.m., he saw them. 3 kids, definitely the ages Karen had described, coming through the woods from the back. They approached the fence, saw the new boards and the lock, and stopped. One of them, the tallest, probably the oldest, pulled on it experimentally. It held. From where Marcus stood, hidden behind the curtains, he watched them turn to each other. One shrugged. They started to leave. Then the man appeared, the same man from the doorbell footage. He said something to the kids. They turned back. He walked over to the fence and examined it. Then he pulled out his phone, took several photos of the fence and the lock, and nodded at the kids as if confirming something. Then he left. The kids left. Everyone disappeared back into the woods. Marcus stood frozen, his heart pounding. What the hell had he just witnessed? He grabbed his phone and pulled up the doorbell footage, cross-referencing the man's appearance. Then he scrolled through the neighborhood Facebook group, searching for anyone he recognized from the video. His instinct told him something was wrong. Someone was organizing this. The man wasn't just a neighbor taking a walk. By that evening, Marcus had made a decision. He was going to set up a trap, a simple one, a way to catch them in the act and document it properly. He wanted evidence. He wanted proof. On the next Saturday afternoon, Marcus called Emma and Lucas's babysitter and told her something had come up at work. Could she watch them for an extra 2 hours? She could. Excellent. Then Marcus positioned a laptop in his bedroom, connected to his security system with every angle recording. He opened his email and drafted a message, but didn't send it. He prepared his phone, put it in his pocket, and waited. At 2:15 p.m., he watched the 3 Morrison kids emerge from the woods. This time they brought someone else, a smaller kid, probably 7, who moved with the cautious excitement of someone experiencing something new. They approached the fence. The tallest one gestured at the lock, explaining something. The smaller one looked disappointed. Marcus watched from the window for another 5 minutes. Then he went downstairs, opened the back door, and stepped out into his yard. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice sharp in the quiet afternoon air. The kids spun around. 4 faces, suddenly stricken with the particular terror that only caught-in-the-act children can show. "I think you all understand that you're trespassing," Marcus said, walking toward the fence. He was holding his phone. He was filming. "I'm going to need you to leave my property immediately, and I'm going to need to speak to your parents." The oldest girl's face went white. We didn't." "Leave," Marcus said, "now." They ran. In the chaos of their flight back toward the woods, one of them dropped a towel, a pink towel with a mermaid on it. Marcus picked it up and watched them disappear. He checked his phone. He had 14 minutes of crystal-clear video of the kids approaching his fence, attempting to access his pool, and the moment he'd confronted them. Perfect documentation. Now Marcus decided he would wait to see what Karen would do. Would she apologize again? Would she be angry? Would she deny it? He would find out soon enough. And that's when the anxiety started to transform into something else. That's when anticipation became something darker, something that felt almost like hunger. Karen didn't come to his door again. Instead, the police showed up on July 24th at 8:30 a.m. 2 officers, very professional, very polite. They asked if Marcus had security cameras on his property. When he confirmed he did, they asked if he'd recorded any trespassing incidents. He said he had. They asked to see the footage. Marcus played the video for them, 14 minutes of crystal-clear evidence, the kids approaching the fence, the failed attempt to access the pool, their flight when he confronted them. The officers watched in silence. One of them took notes. When it was finished, the first officer, a woman named Ramirez, looked up at Marcus. "Mr. Chen, why did you not contact us when this incident occurred?" "I did contact the parents," Marcus said. "Well, the mother, she came to my house and informed me that her children had been trespassing. I fixed the fence. And then they came back anyway." "And when they came back, you filmed them rather than calling us." I wanted documentation, Marcus said. I wanted evidence of what was happening on my property. Officer Ramirez exchanged a look with her partner. Did your legal counsel advise you to film rather than involve law enforcement? The question was casual, but Marcus detected something in it. A warning, a suggestion that maybe he should have involved a lawyer. I didn't involve a lawyer, Marcus said. I was just protecting my property. By luring children onto your property and filming them, Officer Ramirez said. It wasn't a question. I didn't lure them, they trespassed. After you repaired the fence and they were already unable to access your pool, Officer Ramirez said. Why did you allow them to return to the fence? Why not repair it more securely before they had the chance to try again? Marcus felt something shift in the conversation. This was no longer going the way he'd anticipated. Because I wanted to catch them, Marcus said carefully. I wanted evidence. The officers looked at each other again. This time it was more than just a look. It was a communication, a decision being made. Mr. Chen, the reason we're here is because the mother of these children filed a complaint with the police department, alleging that you deliberately created a situation in which children would trespass on your property, and then filmed them without their consent or the consent of their parents. She also alleges that you've been monitoring her family's movement and behavior through your doorbell camera, recording her husband without his consent. Marcus's stomach dropped. I wasn't. Is it true that you recorded a man walking past your house multiple times? Officer Ramirez's partner asked. He was walking past my property repeatedly. I wasn't sure why. Did he enter your property? No. Did he commit a crime? No, but... So you recorded him anyway, Officer Ramirez said. And you're not the property owner along that sidewalk. It's a public street. Did you have consent from this man to film him? I didn't think I needed consent. He was in public. On a public street, not on your property. Your doorbell camera was recording him in a public space without his consent. That's illegal in this state. The air in the room seemed to pressurize. Marcus felt like he was sinking, like the ground beneath his feet was getting softer. I was trying to protect my home, he said. You were trying to catch children, Officer Ramirez said, not unkindly. But that was almost worse. You knew they would attempt to access your property, you left it accessible, you filmed them without their parents' consent or knowledge, and now we have a potential case of child endangerment and privacy violation. Child endangerment? Marcus's voice went up. I did nothing to endanger. You set up a situation in which you knew children would trespass, then confronted them in a recorded manner that caused them distress. One of the children had a panic attack after the incident. That is documented by her mother. The other children are having difficulty sleeping. The youngest experienced incontinence during the incident due to fear. Marcus felt his face draining of color. He hadn't known any of that. He hadn't thought about what would happen after they ran. He just wanted. What had he wanted? What happens now? He asked quietly. We'll be writing up a report, Officer Ramirez said. The family's attorney will likely reach out to your homeowner's insurance. You may want to reach out to your own attorney. The filming of a minor without consent is a serious matter, Mr. Chen, so is deliberately setting up a scenario designed to capture them in evidence. After the officers left, Marcus sat alone in his house for 3 hours without moving. His phone started buzzing around noon. The neighborhood Facebook group was on fire. Someone, Karen, he assumed, had posted about the incident, leaving out certain details, like the fact that the kids had been trespassing for months. She'd framed it as, local homeowner sets trap for children swimming in his pool, records them without consent, deliberately frightens them to the point of trauma. The comments were brutal. They multiplied by the hour. People were calling for his arrest, calling him a predator, calling him worse. Someone dug up his LinkedIn and started leaving reviews on his engineering firm's Google business page. Beware, one read. This man's firm employs a child endangerer. His boss called at 2 p.m. Marcus, what the hell is going on? We're getting calls from clients asking if you've been charged with anything. It's a misunderstanding, Marcus tried to explain. Some neighborhood kids trespassed, I tried to document it, and now it's being blown out of proportion. Your name is all over a neighborhood Facebook group being associated with predatory behavior toward children, his boss said. You need to get ahead of this. Hire a lawyer, get a statement out, do something. This is affecting the company. After his boss hung up, Marcus sat at his kitchen table and tried to think about what to do next. Should he call Karen? Should he go to her house and try to explain? Should he call a lawyer? His hands were shaking too badly to hold his phone. He tried calling Jennifer, but she didn't answer. She was in a client meeting. He left her a voicemail. "Call me. Something bad has happened. I need you." When Jennifer got home at 5:15 p.m., she had already seen the Facebook posts. Her face when she walked into the kitchen was something Marcus would never forget. Disappointment, betrayal, anger, all of it at once directed at him, entirely justified. "Tell me you didn't," she said. "I didn't do what they're saying." "Did you film children without their parents' knowledge?" "Yes, but..." "Did you deliberately set up a situation to catch them?" Marcus couldn't lie. "Yes." Jennifer sat down at the table and put her head in her hands. When she looked up, her eyes were wet. "Why would you do that?" she asked. "Why would you do that, Marcus? They were children, neighborhood children." "Because they trespassed on my property. And I told you to think about it. I told you these were kids from families without pools. I told you there might be a compassionate way to handle it, and instead you set a trap. I didn't know they would." "That's the problem. You didn't think about what would happen. You didn't think about the consequences for them, and now look where we are." Marcus wanted to argue. He wanted to explain that he'd been trying to protect his home, his family, his property. But as he looked at his wife who had known him for 12 years, who had stood by him through everything, and saw the way she was looking at him with something like disgust, he realized that all of those explanations were wrong. The real reason he'd set the trap wasn't protection. It was revenge. It was the need to prove that he was right, that Karen was wrong, that the kids needed to learn a lesson. It was the satisfaction he'd felt watching them panic when he confronted them. It was hunger. That's what he'd tasted. That was what had driven him forward. The lawyer Marcus hired, a criminal defense attorney named Robert Feynman, had a conversation with him in his office that lasted 2 hours and cost him $1,500. The basic conclusion was this: Marcus wasn't going to go to jail. The charges that the family was considering, recording minors without consent, were borderline legally, and the circumstances were ambiguous enough that prosecution was unlikely. However, his reputation was effectively destroyed, both personally and professionally. "The social media aspect is the real problem," Feynman said, scrolling through the Facebook posts on his laptop. "This has gone completely viral in your neighborhood and beyond. You've been painted as a predatory figure, and the narrative is too compelling to counter. People have already decided who you are." "Can we sue for defamation?" Marcus asked. "Defamation is hard to prove when the basic facts, that you recorded children without consent, are accurate. We could send cease and desist letters, but that typically backfires. People take it as proof of guilt. You're better off trying to disappear from the conversation." "How am I supposed to disappear? I live here." "You could move," Feynman said. "That's probably the most realistic option. This neighborhood isn't going to forget. This company isn't going to forget. The internet has decided you're the villain, and the internet doesn't change its mind easily." After he left Feynman's office, Marcus drove to work in a daze. The office felt different, quieter. People who had been friendly now exchanged careful hellos. His boss had arranged for him to work from home indefinitely until things settled down. That evening, Jennifer told him she was taking the kids to stay with her parents for a while. Her tone suggested this wasn't a discussion. "For how long?" he asked. "I don't know, until I can figure out what I want to do, until I can understand how the man I married could do something like that." "It wasn't malicious, Jen. I was just..." "You were just trying to humiliate children," she said flatly. "That's what you did, regardless of your intentions. Intentions don't matter when the consequences are real." She packed that night while Marcus sat downstairs trying not to drink himself stupid. By midnight, Jennifer's car was loaded and she was buckling the kids into their seats. Emma looked confused and worried. Lucas was asleep. "Are you coming?" Emma asked Marcus through the window. "Your mom and I just need some space," Marcus said, the lie automatic response. "You'll stay with Grandma for a little while." "Why?" He couldn't answer that. He couldn't tell his 8-year-old daughter the truth, that her father had made a terrible decision that had consumed their lives, that sometimes adults made choices that seemed rational in the moment but ruined everything afterward. that sometimes you couldn't take things back. After they left, the house was silent in a way it had never been before. Marcus went to the living room and turned on the television. The news was covering a different story, a political scandal, something that had nothing to do with him. He changed the channel, business news, weather, a documentary about penguins. He kept changing until he landed on a true crime show about a man who had obsessively monitored his neighbors, convinced they were planning something against him. Marcus turned it off. By July 28th, he'd lost 3 clients from his firm. His boss had called a meeting where they discussed putting Marcus on administrative leave pending a review of his employment. In HR language, that meant, we're figuring out how to fire you without being sued. By August 2nd, his insurance company had informed him that the family had filed a claim. The settlement demand was $80,000, money for therapy for the children, money for pain and suffering, money for their attorney's fees. His insurance company suggested he take it, because going to court would cost more and he would definitely lose. On August 5th, Marcus got a letter from the Homeowners Association. There were 3 separate complaints filed against him for conduct detrimental to the community. They were initiating a hearing to determine if further action should be taken. By August 10th, Marcus hadn't left his house in 6 days. He'd stopped showering. He'd stopped returning calls from anyone except his lawyer. He'd started drinking at 10 a.m. and continuing until he passed out. He was living in his expensive home like it was a prison, which he supposed it essentially was. That was when the package arrived. Marcus found it on his front porch when he finally ventured outside to get the mail he'd been ignoring. It was unmarked, no return address. His name was written on the front in careful block letters. He opened it. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note on lined notebook paper. The handwriting was childish, probably written by someone in elementary school, but the words were surprisingly precise. These are video clips of you filming us. We got copies from your security company's cloud storage. Our lawyer says you have 24 hours to send us an apology letter and $5,000, or we're posting these videos with the timestamps showing you deliberately let us back through the fence on purpose. We'll post them on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and every news outlet. We have a lawyer. We have evidence. You have 24 hours. Marcus's hands started shaking. His security system. He'd never changed the password. He'd never secured the cloud storage with proper security protocols. And the Morrison family, or someone associated with them, someone young enough to write like this but intelligent enough to understand cloud storage, had accessed it. They had everything, all of his security footage, all of his monitoring of the man, all of his careful, deliberate preparation of the trap. And they were threatening to release it. Marcus looked at the USB drive in his hand. Part of him wanted to plug it in immediately to see what they had. The other part of him understood that it didn't matter. They had proof. They had everything they needed. He went back inside and called Robert Feynman again. "We need to talk," Marcus said. "I'm with a client," Feynman said. "Can this wait?" "The Morrison family just delivered a threat to my house. They have copies of my security footage. They're asking for money and an apology, or they'll go public with everything." There was a long silence. "Don't respond to them," Feynman said finally. "Don't acknowledge receipt of the package. In fact, you should probably turn it over to the police. This could constitute extortion." "But," and Marcus, "this might be a good time to accelerate your plan to move out of state. California law is going to be very unfavorable to you if this escalates any further. I'd start looking at options." After he hung up, Marcus sat at his kitchen table and stared at the note. $5,000 and an apology. That was what they wanted. The choice was rendered absurdly clear by the threat. He could either meet their demands, or he could watch his reputation disintegrate on a global scale. He could either admit he was wrong and pay for the privilege, or he could continue to insist he was right and lose everything. There was really no choice at all. Marcus wrote the apology letter on August 11th. He rewrote it 17 times. The first versions were defensive. "I apologize if my actions were misunderstood. I regret that the situation escalated." All of them found ways to make himself the victim, to suggest that maybe, in some alternate interpretation of events, he hadn't been entirely at fault. By the 18th attempt, something shifted. He stopped writing the apology that he needed to write for himself, and he tried to write the one that was actually true. To the Morrison family, I am writing to formally apologize for my conduct toward your children. When your family first contacted me about them accessing my pool through the fence, I responded with anger rather than compassion. When I became aware they had returned, I made a deliberate decision to document the incident rather than simply repair the breach more securely. I then deliberately positioned myself to observe and confront your children, knowing it would cause them distress. I filmed them without your consent. These actions were wrong. They were not about protection or property rights. They were about humiliation. I wanted your children to feel caught, to feel ashamed. And in doing so, I caused real harm to real people, children who did not deserve to be treated that way. I cannot undo what I did. I can only acknowledge it, accept responsibility for it, and attempt to make what restitution I can. I'm enclosing a check for $5,000, which I understand will be applied toward counseling and therapy for your children. I understand this money does not restore the damage caused. I'm simply trying to address it as best I can. I also want to acknowledge that your children were doing what children do, exploring, seeking relief from summer heat, looking for freedom in a world where many families do not have access to such resources. Their behavior was the behavior of children. My response was the behavior of someone allowing anger and judgment to override empathy. I am sorry. I mean that completely and without reservation. Sincerely, Marcus Chen. He read it 3 times. Each time, something about the words felt hollow, but he wasn't sure if that was because they were hollow or because no amount of words could ever truly repair what he'd broken. He wrote the check, $5,000, written to Corinne Morrison as requested. He put both items in an envelope and drove to the post office, paid for tracking, and sent it before he could change his mind. That was on August 11th. By August 13th, the Morrison family had received the letter and the check. By August 14th, the threat of viral revenge had been lifted. Corinne had posted on the neighborhood Facebook group that the situation had been resolved and that Marcus had apologized. By August 16th, the internet's attention had begun to drift elsewhere. By September 1st, the whole thing had been mostly forgotten by the broader digital sphere. But not by Marcus, not by anyone in the immediate vicinity. Jennifer came back on August 28th, but only to help him pack. She'd spent 2 weeks at her parents' house thinking about whether the marriage was salvageable, and she'd decided it wasn't. Not immediately, maybe not ever. She wanted a divorce. I can't look at you the same way, she said, holding a box of his books. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way. We can go to couples therapy, Marcus offered weakly. We can work through this. With what money? Jennifer asked. You've been placed on indefinite leave from your job pending investigation. We're going to have to sell the house to cover legal fees and the settlement. We're going to lose everything, Marcus. And I keep asking myself, why? Why did you have to hurt children? Why wasn't compassion ever an option? I don't know, Marcus said, and he meant it. He genuinely didn't know anymore. Looking back at the decisions he'd made, the rational explanations all felt like lies he'd been telling himself. That's what terrifies me the most, Jennifer said. That you don't know, that someone I love could make these decisions and not fully understand why. That scares me more than the decisions themselves. She left on September 2nd. The divorce paperwork was filed by September 15th. By October, the house had been listed for sale, not at the premium price Marcus had imagined, but at a significant loss. The realtor was sympathetic but clear. Nobody wanted to buy the house of the guy who trapped neighborhood kids. The house sold on October 22nd to investors who planned to flip it. By November, Marcus had moved into a small apartment 30 miles away in a town where nobody knew him. His job had officially terminated him on November 1st. His professional reputation in the structural engineering field had been severely damaged. Several of his former colleagues had actively discouraged clients from hearing him. It was in this apartment, in this state of near-total collapse, that Marcus received a package in early December. Inside was a photo, a printed photograph, standard 4x6 size. It showed the Morrison children, all 3 of them plus 2 others Marcus didn't recognize, standing in front of his old house. The photo had been taken from the street, obviously, but what caught Marcus's attention was what was happening in the photo. The children were laughing. They looked happy. They looked like children on a summer day doing normal children things. On the back of the photo, someone had written, "They learned that sometimes what looks like a wall can be crossed. Sometimes what seems private can be shared. Sometimes adults make mistakes and kids can be bigger than that. Merry Christmas. Corinne." Marcus stared at the photo for a long time. He wasn't sure what the message meant. Was it a threat? A kindness? A reminder? All of it seemed possible. What he understood with perfect clarity was that this was his reckoning. This was what happened when you made the decision he'd made. Not just consequences, those he'd already experienced in abundance, but a different kind of consequence. The kind that came when someone who had every reason to destroy you instead chose to remind you of the humanity you'd failed to extend to them. He put the photo on his apartment wall, where he could see it every day. By January of the following year, Marcus had started going to therapy. Real therapy, the kind designed to help him understand why he'd made the decisions he'd made, why he'd been so hungry for revenge, so willing to hurt children. He was working part-time as a contractor, not the prestige work he'd done before, but honest work. He was paying restitution. He wasn't allowed to move back to his old neighborhood. The restraining order was informal but absolute. He would never swim in his expensive pool again. Sometimes Marcus would look at that photo and think about how it could have gone differently. How if he'd just said yes to the compromise he'd offered, Saturday afternoons, supervised, the kids following his rules, none of this would have happened. How Jennifer might still be his wife. How his career wouldn't be destroyed. How the Morrison children wouldn't have needed therapy. It was a small decision. One afternoon a week, letting neighborhood kids use his pool. Instead, he'd chosen his anger. And now he was living with that choice. The final twist came in March, when Marcus was contacted by a documentary filmmaker who wanted to make a short film about the incident for a series on digital public shamming and online justice. Marcus initially refused, but his therapist suggested it might be part of his reckoning. The documentary didn't air for another 6 months, but when it did, something unexpected happened. Instead of portraying Marcus as a villain, the documentary told the fuller story. The complexity of it all, the way good intentions could curdle into cruelty, the way social media could create its own justice system that bore little resemblance to actual justice. It showed the Morrison family's perspective, their genuine attempts to make things right, their decision to forgive rather than destroy. The documentary went viral, not in the destructive way, but in a way that actually made people think. Suddenly, strangers were reaching out to Marcus, sharing stories of their own situations where anger had overridden compassion. His therapist suggested he start a blog about conflict resolution and the dangers of digital retaliation. Within a year, Marcus had published a book about the experience. He was invited to speak at schools about empathy and consequences. It was strange, surreal even, to be known for the worst decision of his life, and to have that transformed into something that might, possibly, help others avoid making the same choice. But it didn't bring Jennifer back. It didn't restore his reputation completely. It didn't make the hurt disappear. It was just what remained after the fire burned through. The ash, the reconstruction, the attempt to build something worth building from the rubble. And every time Marcus looked at that photo of the Morrison children laughing in front of his old house, he understood what Karen had meant. Sometimes the biggest lesson comes not from getting what you deserve, but from receiving grace you don't. The email arrived on Marcus's birthday, 3 years almost to the month from the day everything had fallen apart. Hi, Marcus. I hope this email finds you well. My mom asked me to reach out to you because she said it was important that you know something. I'm now 12. My younger siblings are 7 and 8. We're all okay. We go to therapy, but it's not because we're damaged from what happened. My therapist says we're actually doing really well. She says that what happened was upsetting, but that it became less upsetting when we realized that you had realized you were wrong. My therapist says that's actually a pretty rare thing for an adult to genuinely apologize and change. She says a lot of adults don't do that. My mom said to tell you that she forgave you a long time ago. She said that when you sent that letter and the money, and when your apology seemed real, she realized that you were just someone who had made a bad choice. She said that's all any of us are, people who make choices, sometimes bad ones. She said she didn't want us to grow up hating you or blaming you, because then we'd be giving that incident power over our lives, and it didn't deserve that power. So we forgave you, and then we moved on. I'm writing now because I wanted you to know that we turned out fine. We're happy. We have a good life. And part of why we have such a good life is because my mom raised us to understand that people can make mistakes and that forgiveness is possible. My mom also wanted me to tell you something. She started a nonprofit for families in low-income neighborhoods, providing access to community pools and swimming lessons for kids. She's using some of the money from the settlement to help other kids who don't have access to pools to learn to swim. She said she wanted to transform that incident into something that helps instead of hurts. I think that's pretty cool. Anyway, I hope you're doing better now. My mom said you went through a lot because of the choices you made. She doesn't think that was entirely fair because she thinks everyone deserves a chance to change. But she also said that consequences are part of growing, so I guess it worked out. Take care of yourself, Mr. Chen, and thanks for actually caring about what you did. Emma Morrison. Marcus read the email 4 times. On the 4th time through, he let himself cry, not the desperate, self-pitying tears he'd shed in his apartment 3 years ago, but something deeper. Something that felt like genuine catharsis. He didn't respond to the email right away. He waited 3 days, thinking about what to say. Finally, he wrote, "Dear Emma, thank you for taking the time to write to me. Thank you more for forgiving me. I want you to know that what you said about my going through consequences, that was the part I needed to hear. I spent so long feeling like I'd been unfairly treated, like I was the victim of a social media pylon. But the truth is, I caused damage. Real damage to real people. The consequences I experienced were the actual, inevitable result of harm I caused. The fact that I got a second chance and that your family allowed me to have one, that was grace. That wasn't fair, that was kindness. And knowing that you're all okay, that your mom is using her energy to help other kids rather than destroy me, that tells me that your family is made of something better than I was made of in that moment. Keep being the kind of person who can forgive. Keep being the kind of person who can move forward. The world needs more people like you and your family. And tell your mom that I'm proud of her nonprofit. If I can help in any way, you know where to find me. With gratitude and respect. Marcus." By the time Marcus sent this email, he'd already been invited to speak at several universities about digital ethics and the psychological drivers of revenge. He'd remarried a woman named Sarah who'd met him after reading his book. He was living a quiet, honest life, not the life he'd imagined when he built that expensive pool, but a better one, a realer one. He never moved back to his old neighborhood. He never rebuilt his engineering career to its previous heights. He never forgot what he'd been capable of when anger and defensiveness had taken control.